Hello, my name is Santiago Deambrosi, and I'll be talking about policy landscapes and LGBTQ youth outcomes. Thank you very much for joining my presentation. The issue is that there is a set of policies and laws that affect how LGBTQ youth experience day-to-day living in a way that does not impact the way that non-LGBTQ youth experience daily life. This sets the stage for minority stress and consequently affects the mental health of kids. For example, non-LGBTQ kids have to worry about whether they will be able to marry their significant other in the future or whether they will be able to adopt. They might even worry about the possibility of being fired for expressing their sexual orientation or gender identity. Why is this important? Kids are coming out at a younger age, and this is intersecting with a very important developmental stage. It has been shown in digital economics as well as in other fields that adverse experiences during this developmental stage has lifelong consequences on mental health, human capital, and therefore in income and other ways that kids interact with the economy. I spent half of my time at the Research in Color Foundation trying to find data for a project on this topic, and I was unable to. I'm very lucky to have a great advisor who kept pushing me to get data, and I was able to find data for 3 different projects. I will be talking about the project in the center. I studied the impact of Utah's repeal of its no promo homo policy. They repealed the policy in 2017. No promo homo policies were developed in the 90s with the explicit goal of prohibiting teachers from discussing LGBTQ topics or teaching HIV. And in many cases, in many states, they mandated that it should be taught in a negative way. 5 states still have no promo homo policies, and there's a lot of literature, qualitative literature, that indicates they have a very negative impact on kids, and advocates have been fighting for decades to repeal these policies. In 2017, Utah repealed its policy, and I studied what is the impact of that policy in different outcomes that might impact LGBTQ youth. I used the School Health Profile Survey, which is a survey that the CDC has been implementing since the 1990s. It's not very widely used because it's a very hard survey to use. It's not easily accessible. There's a lot of data cleaning that has to go on. I actually had to map decades of questions throughout the surveys to be able to analyze the data. I had to approach more than a dozen different states to convince them of the value of this project and sign data agreements, which I then had to go back to the CDC to be able to get the data. In fact, for a lot of the surveys from the 90s to the early 2000s, I actually had the physical survey, which I had to transcribe to my code. The good part is that I will be making all of that available to the public so that researchers can use this survey, which asks teachers and principals about the policies and practices that they implement in their schools. I find that the repeal of the no promo homo policy increased significantly the percentage of schools that have gay-straight alliances in Utah. In fact, it increased it so much that it closed the gap between the percentage of schools in Utah and the national average that have GSAs, gay-straight alliances. It had a very minor increase in the percentage of schools that taught HIV or human sexuality, and it did not increase the training of teachers in these 2 topics. Why are GSAs important? There is a wide literature that links them to reduction in suicide ideation and improvement in mental health. These results are very important in terms of policy implications. First, it's the first study that is able to quantitatively assess the impact of such policies on LGBTQ outcomes. And further beyond that, I argue that from the findings that simply repealing such policies is not sufficient to combat decades of institutional practices in the teaching of HIV. So in other words, we have to repeal these policies, and they must be accompanied with proactive laws that seek to increase HIV, sexual orientation, and gender identity training, awareness, and education. What did I find throughout the 3 different projects? Anti-LGBTQ policies have a very significant impact on LGBTQ youth outcomes. This has a direct impact on the economy at the moment, but also at the future. This is very important because it's one of the first studies that assesses the impact of these policies in a quantitative way. And then second of all, it's very shameful that we're not collecting data on this demographic. We should be improving this significantly. I want to thank my advisor, Chris Nielsen, and Christopher Carpenter, Kate Carpenter, from Vanderbilt, as well as other professors who helped me in different ways, and especially the Research in Color team, which without them, this would not have been possible. Thank you.